provide direction regarding the event bookings and booking from the park for the 2012 calendar year. As you know, we have not been taking any reservations for weddings in 2012. I guess what we're going to discuss tonight is whether we should or we should not. So with that, again, bring it to the council and ask when we're going to take it.
Could I ask a question of Mike? Mike, you say that we might net $64,000, about $65,000, but it doesn't include capital expenditure or overhead allocation, right?
That's correct.
So with capital expenditure and overhead allocation, what will we net? Is it going to be a deficit again?
Currently, we are going to do another cost allocation because of the recent reorganization in the town's operation. But the last cost allocation prepared by MBS using the 2010, I believe, budgeted number, the cost allocated to the park program is over $150,000.
Which means it would be a deficit.
If you
Well, it depends upon how much of that cost you allocate to this.
Using the prior year's budget cost for administration, IT, and finance, and all the supporting departments, I remember it's over $150,000 using that budget amount. But now with the town's reduction in workforce, that's why we will be doing another cost allocation update. Mm-hmm. But using that old number, it will be, you can say that it can contribute to a deficit numbers if you were to use that cost allocation numbers.
Well, let me add some clarity to that, please. Thanks. I think the question really on the table first, which will lead, depending on the decision tree, what happens, there'll be several decisions to make. I'm not comfortable stopping future weddings unless it's a policy decision from council, because it's been somewhat based on executive authority up till now as you go through a planning process. We are getting constant inquiries on reservations for weddings going into next year, into the wedding season. The system that we have today eliminates the problems we had in the past, that overhead was so steep we couldn't make a profit. We can make 50% of all the revenues collected come back to the city. If you choose not to do this, then it doesn't make any, then it stops right here, if you don't want to do that. We should talk to them about whether or not you want to continue on meetings, business meetings, things like that, some of your local, the dames, issues like that. Because previously those were just taken out of overhead costs of having employees. We don't have those employees any longer. Now we're going to have to set a budget aside, if you'd like to continue those, to put people in parks meetings, like the dames and like others. If you decide to go to, we'll have some meetings, and then you also need to decide, is there a size cap and all that. We'll have to go back and redo the cost schedule, because it's old and it doesn't include some of the overhead costs that it needs to have. So I think the first policy question is, do you want to continue with events? Do you want to continue with weddings? If you do, then you should also direct me to come back with you with a proposal for, or I guess we'll add it, Louise, to the MBS funding. I don't know if it'll be included in that or not, but I got to come back to you with a new fee schedule as well.
Well, but the question is if you take the cost allocation,
yes,
and the cost allocation is going to be less because you don't have the same overhead fees. But even if it's not the same, how much of that overhead wouldn't be there but for the fact that we might have the wedding or the corporate event or some other event? Because clearly we would still be using it. We still have the building and we still have overhead, but how much of that overhead wouldn't be there but for those events? So that's what we need to know. How much are we actually costing out against those events so that we know whether or not it's profitable to continue the events.
Well, it will be profitable if the cost analysis tells you it costs X number of dollars, whether you open the building or not. You have certain capital costs, you have utility costs, you have certain maintenance costs that are accelerated if it's used more, less if it's used less. So because you're coming at this from a completely different model of usage, we need to go back and take a look about what's the real cost of doing it this way. And I think that your original question was interesting, that, I mean, if we collect $64,000, that appears to be a pure, I don't want to use the word profit, but it appears to be unallocated funds. We're not really considering what the overhead costs are that we're associating with. So we need to restudy what the actual fee schedule should be if you decide to continue with weddings.
See, but I'd like to know in advance, what if we decide, what would be the cost if we decide, what would be the profit and the overhead? What would be, we know what the net is, but what would be the overhead that would be associated with these events if we continued with them? And what would be the overhead if we didn't have these events?
Mr. Mayor, I think there's an important factor that you probably ought to at least be aware of. Remember Prop 26 was adopted by the voters a year and a half ago, and that says basically towns cannot make profits. If you make a profit, it's called a tax, except there are 7 exceptions. One of those exceptions is for proprietary concerns like this, where we rent facilities to the general public just like somebody else. This is one of the few exceptions where you can actually make a profit. So we don't have to include it in the fee study. In fact, it's not supposed to be in the fee study. You can set the fee at whatever level you want, designed to make money and offset your general fund costs in other areas. Towns that have convention centers or conference centers, those are money-making engines that they use to help fund government. Using
That's
Monterey.
great, but we don't know whether or not this would make money or not in order to know whether or not we should increase the fee. And the other thing is, Jean Cardona for years stated that as far as weddings were concerned, and I don't know if it's true or not, but she said you couldn't increase weddings beyond what they already were because people would not book there. It wasn't worth more than what it already was at. Now, that's something that clearly has to be studied, but supposedly she was the expert and that was her statement. Now, I'm not saying we should...
There'd be a way to test that.
I'm
You know what,
not saying that we abide by that,
Can
but we
anybody
don't
else
know whether or not this is making money or not because we don't know what the cost
Mayor,
is allocated to it are.
Anybody else have a...
Well, I was going to say,
Yeah, go ahead, but I mean...
I was going to say there are other issues involved here. That no matter what we come up with, the amount of money we either make or lose is not going to be very much. My belief is that the park should be open to Atherton residents at the weekend. That's the time when we should have the park and all the parking at the park available for Atherton residents. Most weddings occur at the weekends. Most weddings are for non-Atherton residents. Almost all weddings are for non-Atherton residents. So I think tonight we have to consider some other things. One is, do we want to fill the park at the weekends with weddings for non-Atherton residents, which immediately will reduce the use of the park for Atherton residents and other people who want to use it with the kids, the grandkids. So I would like to say that's one issue I would like to have the council discuss. And then, some of the things that we've done seem totally stupid to me. We had 500 to 800 Google employees here, for which we charge $1,000. So,
1,050.
or something like that. My feeling is very simple, that we ought to reduce the intrusion of outside people to the park so that the residents of Atherton can enjoy it. For instance, if I was making the decision, which clearly I'm not, I would reduce the events, the number of people at any event, to somewhere in the region of 50, and I would charge on a per head basis. At the same time, I believe that we should not have weddings at the weekends because it virtually fills up all the parking places and it prevents our residents having the enjoyable use of the park. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I can't believe the inconsistencies I've been hearing from you here. You've just approved putting a library in the park, or at least having that considered. I will bet you that most of the library users, a big portion of those library users, will be from outside of Atherton. And so, to say that you don't want to have non-Atherton people on the weekends and so forth, you're not following a consistent path. Secondly, and more importantly, we've recently taken actions to cut staff, to reduce costs of our town staff, and people have lost their jobs. And to say that we won't consider maintaining or improving revenues that we could get from holding town events in the park to offset costs, to me, is completely inconsistent with our financial goals of trying to balance the budget. I think if staff can demonstrate that this can be done profitably, that the town can offset some of the park costs by going ahead and making the bookings, that should have an overriding thing in favor of going ahead with resuming these bookings.
Jerry, just to explain what you consider to be my inconsistencies, it's not inconsistent in any way. I don't believe if the library's in the park, it will fill up every parking space at the weekends. I don't believe that in any way whatsoever, because that's not the way people go to libraries. But these weddings...
You don't know that, Mayor, and I don't know that, so...
Well, I'm telling you what I do know, is that the times I've gone to the park when they've had big weddings there, every parking spot. I know some things. I may not know the others, but I do know the times I've been there, every parking spot has been filled. And in my mind, that doesn't make any sense if we're going to open up the park.
Even if it made money for the park.
Well, it depends how much money we've... In the past, the last 3 years, we've never shown any profit.
Well, don't talk about the last 3 years.
Yeah.
That's an obsolete model. We're talking about something new now.
Well, and the fact is, I mean, I've always said that I think that, we were always charging too low fees for the events at the park. Notwithstanding Jean Cardona and all of her years and years of expertise and everything, I don't think that the valuation was ever increased for the being at the park and having a wedding at the park. And so I don't know who made the decision, the executive decision back in April to stop renting out the park. It says in the staff report, city manager did. I don't think so. I think the mayor directed the city manager to, because I have been hearing the mayor over the last 2 years say, we've got to stop renting out the park. We've got to get rid of the weddings. The same stuff. We've got to get rid of the weddings. They're taking over the park. And so it's just amazing to me that we literally stopped booking any potential revenue generating to offset anything, even if it was losing. I mean, we're certainly losing a lot more now, not having any revenue generation at all. And now we've got this new model. I think certainly, it's gonna be better marketed. I don't think that our town staff did very good marketing for the facilities and the rental, and they didn't price it well. If you want to have a wedding at the park, one way to, kind of cut down maybe the big masses is to raise your price. It's a jewel. The pavilion is a little dated, but but the grounds are gorgeous. And so, we charge a premium for it. It's in Atherton, for goodness sake. So, I've just heard, the mayor over the last couple of years say, get rid of the weddings at the park because they're impacting everything. Charge more. Don't have so many, but charge more. And I think that we've got to start getting this revenue stream back on.
Well, as I remember, I don't think we should blame the staff. I think if we're going to blame anybody for the charges, it's not Jean Cardona, it's not the staff, it's us. Because I think in the last fee schedule,
Elizabeth, I'm really amazed that you would not consider Atherton residents' use of the park on weekends is a very, very important item.
I'm not saying the Atherton residents can't use the park on weekends.
Well, I'm
They
saying
can
that there's
use
no
it.
parking there if they have weddings there, so the use is going to go way down.
Then we need more parking at the park. And if we
Way
put,
down.
we build an 11,000 square foot library, I guarantee you, you're not going to have any parking
No,
available.
I don't think. Anyway, we have an item here. So I would say we have an item to be voted on, that we have to.
Could we
Public comment.
get more information about what the actual cost of this is going to be?
When you say actual cost, council member, are you talking, I have the events that have been held there, the charges against them. There is a split at August, because after August is the new methodology, before August was the old methodology.
But we don't have the overhead, which Louise said you're going to recalculate. What I would like to know is what we actually believe it would be with the overhead that's just due to the fact that we're having events, and without the overhead that's just due to these events.
Which is different than what Louise has been doing, where she's taken all the overhead and set a portion of that to, I agree with Kathy on this, that you look at the variable overhead that is associated with the events and not the other overhead, because that'd be a contribution to the other overhead if there's any profit.
Right.
And we have cleanup costs, we have preparation costs.
See, I'd like to know.
The caterer takes care of all those.
that.
Yeah, I want to know what the cost is without these events and what the cost is with the events, and whether or not it makes sense thus to continue the events if we're losing so much more, because the additional cost is so much more that we're better off not doing anything. That is not a determination I can make, because I just don't know how high that capital expenditure and overhead allocation is going to be.
But it seems to me that so much of the cleanup costs and the costs associated with the event is borne by the event planner. And so then you've got just your normal fixed allocation that you're going to have to pay anyway.
You got water, though, might be variable, and a few things
Water,
like that.
Yeah,
electrical.
water,
Yeah,
well,
power,
that-
power,
and
electricity.
And
really-
there's maintenance around,
And the
which I
maintenance-
understand is very high, the maintenance. Apparently 80% or so, I was told, of the maintenance in the park is attributable to that area around the wedding area.
That's what,
But you wouldn't, you'd maintain it anyway.
No, not that,
You'd
not
let-
ar- not around
We,
the wedding
we
area.
had an event over there, and the guy was out there sweeping. I mean,
Not
and-
around the wedding area. It's a high maintenance area, I'm told, because of the weddings. I was told that by Jean Cardona
absolutely.
and the people at
Wow.
the park. So I don't know. I mean, I'd like,
I think you mow the lawn, you plant the flowers, it's something that you do.
it's conjecture. I'd like to know.
It's
Do we want to
way
table this item until?
Yes, that's what I would like to do.
until John comes
I
up
think
with
we
more
need to get
information?
it back online, as, he's been doing it. He's already been doing it.
Will we lose him if we delay on this?
The contractor has indicated that unless he has enough business to make it profitable, that he will not continue. So he's seeing the end of the line for him come, well, at the end of this wedding season, and will not re-up, because the meetings themselves aren't enough to sustain what he needs to do. He needs weddings to make it work, because that's where the real money
what
is.
he's
But
wanting to do is
that's
book
That's a
weddings.
policy decision.
But the wedding season isn't going to be another month.
Lauren wants to talk.
Another month isn't going to make a difference in the wedding
Wedding
season.
season's not
Well,
going to be for another 6
It's,
months.
it's really the reservation season that we're in. That's why last week we got like 25 inquiries,
Uh-huh.
or last month we got 25 inquiries. So at some point, if you decide to renew weddings, we would need to know that at some point so that we can start to negotiate what the wedding season would look like. If we're not going to do it, then we need to get the word out and say, this is it, it's over in 2011, there will be no more weddings.
Because we need that to determine, do we want to continue? And if it doesn't look profitable, do we want to increase the fee?
Well, there's no question that the fee schedule is off. The reason that 800 Google employees were in there is because the master fee schedule said you could charge $1,000.
Yep. So that's
And
why I
that-
think
and
we
that
need
was
to table
ludicrous.
it in order to make
And we,
it.
we on staff side maybe a little asleep at the wheel here.
We talk
That we could have charged $20,000 for that maybe.
Charge them $50 a head.
Yeah, I think one more month and we're not making a rash decision.
Well, we're looking like we're going to have a meeting in the next 2 weeks. Why don't we add it to that agenda?
No.
Okay? No problem.
So you'd
I
like
don't
the
have a
cost
dog in the fight,
allocations just to be
personally. I don't-
direct cost allocations,
Yeah,
not
sure enough.
Direct
in-
overhead, yeah.
direct overhead. Okay. I can bring that back to you.
And
So-
overhead that's not direct, but rather
necessary for the park.
What do you mean by that?
I mean necessary for the facilities, even if you didn't have these events.
Well, that's pretty
No,
direct.
no.
Yes.
If there are no events.
I
what
want
is-
both.
What is the
Well,
cost of the
but
facility?
those costs are going to be incurred whether you have events or
That's
not.
exactly right, and I
So
want to know
what
what
does
they
that,
are.
what does that tell you?
It tells me how much it would actually be costing us to maintain those buildings,
So it is direct cost.
and what we're subsidizing.
I'm still far more concerned about filling up every parking space on the weekends with weddings, removing the park as a place where Atherton residents can go. To me, I think that is the wrong thing to do. I think we want to keep the park open for Atherton residents, and filling it up with weddings and other events, at weekends especially, in my mind, is totally wrong.
Yeah, I mean, if that figure comes back unlikely, $10,000, then is it worth $10,000 to check it all and say, okay, let's open it up to people and forget events entirely? If it comes back $60,000, then that's a different story. You want to look at it differently.
Maybe
So I think
even
I'd like to know
100,000.
both figures.
So, do we,
May I make a comment, or?
You have a public comment.
yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I think the thing that we're not thinking about here is the fact that Atherton residents do use the park for events. I mean, I've rented every one of those buildings at one time or another, and if you make the cost so astronomical that I can't have a birthday party and nobody else can have a birthday party, or can't have yoga anymore, or can't have a block building thing, then it's like you're taking away also the use of that park for other people. If we can't meet with the Atherton Dames because it's so astronomical, it's $20,000. So you might look at your different things, but this came up when we went through the whole master fee schedule, raising the fees and so on. So it's not like it hasn't been touched in the last few years. And I'm very frustrated with the fact that every single thing is going up in rates. And as residents, we don't get any benefit from, you don't have the friendly ability to use that park anymore. It's all about this, that, and the other thing. Now, as far as weddings, if you're going to, maybe you say you can do 20 weddings a year and they're all going to cost X, Y, and Z. You figure out what revenue you want to make. Maybe your goal is to make $200,000 a year on events, and back it out and figure out what you have to make, how many events you have to book, and how you're going to do it. But maybe there's a way here before the construction starts to maximize the amount of money you can get and, try to do something that's going to help it. And you don't have to say that you're going to do it for the 2012 season, just do it for the 2011, but make the decision so you can actually book the revenue. And I understand about the parking places, but every single day that I went there when play school and everybody else is in the morning, it doesn't have to be an event. The parking spaces are filled anyway, so, I think parking is a big issue in the park, but I don't think it's just because of corporate events or because of weddings. I think
I'm
it just
saying,
is.
Lauren, that I'm not talking about your birthday parties. That's not, I'm talking about weddings for non-Atherton residents. And time again, they fill up every parking place of the weekend. So we're not talking about you arranging a birthday party. That's a whole different subject.
I would like to see a table.
Okay.
Table status quo until we come back next time.
Are you making a motion?
Yes.
I'll second.
Well, how long would it take to get this documentation, seriously? And is it something that there's a finance committee or for a rate analysis, there's an audit committee meeting that's coming up? Do they have to look at that before? I mean, it's important, I think, that it is a revenue generating thing. It does help the park. And to me, we need additional information. We should be able to get it fairly quickly. I mean, I don't think it's going to be significant. I don't think it's going to significantly change the numbers. But
Well, the only thing we're going to be adding is direct cost.
right.
But we still have to make a decision as a council. Or either it's calling a special council meeting, I don't know.
No.
Which doesn't make any sense, or
Not for that.
waiting till the next council meeting. If waiting till the next council meeting is a problem, I'd like to hear it. Is it a problem?
It's not a problem to me. It's something to consider that people who may have wanted to reserve. That's why I think the big question is: do you want to continue the weddings at the park for the 2012 wedding season? After that, I think it becomes a little dicier depending on construction activities that may or may not and all that. I don't want to. I can't rent the park if I can't guarantee that bride.
Can we wait till the next council meeting to make the decision?
can tell people for the next month that the wedding, the 2012 wedding season is not open up.
So we table this, if we, council agrees to table this, you can come back to the next council. So, we have a motion to table, I will second that. All in favor?
I don't understand why we can't make a decision on it today. Yeah, I don't think that the direct costs versus indirect costs are going to be that significant. John, in your opinion, do you believe that they're going to be? Or Louise, in your opinion, do you think it's going to be a substantial change to the numbers? I mean, yeah, we're not asking for an exact calculation down to the penny, but I mean, seriously, we should know what our direct costs are roughly. It's a 10%, 20%, which is it?
Well, do they include capital replacement costs as well?
No.
I wouldn't put that in.
No. No, it's just
Why not?
maintenance.
The wear and tear is such a short duration there for 1 year, difference in that.
I mean, we've got ovens and everything else in
Right.
there, we should be depreciating them, that should be a cost that we take into account.
Well, it is a cost, but it isn't an incremental cost because we have events, or don't have events.
Are we going to end up with a profit or not?
I said, well, probably.
I'm asking the If you can't answer the question, that concerns me.
Absolutely.
Can we give Louise some time to do some calculation, go on to the next item, and come back to this one so she can not work under so much pressure?
It's included. It's included.
The nuisance is nothing.
Well,
Supposedly.
Louise, it's your call.
Looking back at the past history based on how the former public works director had coded the invoice, the program direct expense related that are chargeable to the program based on how the invoice is coded, it can range maybe somewhere from $36,000 to $64,000 a year. But that's without, I think, what Council Member McKeeven is asking about the direct overhead. Like, even though we have a caterer that is going to handle the booking and all that, but that still would be support costs in terms of like finance, have to issue refund checks, take in the deposit, process the cash receipt. So those are also costs that if you want to look at the overall cost, those are all, in a way, those are also indirect costs, but directly related to having events.
But do you think that, just a guess,
Uh-huh.
that with all the overheads, we'd end up about $30,000 a year?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, to me, for $30,000 a year, it's just not worth doing.
I think it is worth it.
But I think a lot of it will depend on the revenue, how much booking we're going to have, because if you are sharing your cost 50-50 with the caterer and the town, the more margin you have, the more you can absorb your overhead costs. So it really would depend on the booking and how much revenue we can get. Because the more we have in our 50%, the more it will pay for the direct cost and the direct overhead.
That's 10 to 15%.
Well, they're projecting $65,000. So on $65,000, what do you think?
She just says half.
I think 65,000, and you have to look at the support cost, so it may be a close cost, because we say based on this report that was prepared, town expense is estimated to be 65, and the town share of the revenue is about 130. So you really are looking at available $65,000 to pay for the overhead, because the $65,000 is already the program direct cost. So I would say that if this revenue of 260 is true, and a lot depend on how much is the overhead, it may break even or come out with a profit, depend on how much is the support overhead cost.
I mean, to deprive the residents of Atherton use of the park that weekends for an overall profit of $30,000, to me, it's just maybe or less. It's just total stupidity in my mind.
Well, they could be break even or...
Could even be break even. For council members to say that we should go ahead on that basis, I just can't understand it. Why should, we are supposed to be representing the residents of Atherton, which I always, I feel that the park should be open to the residents, especially in the weekend. And for a trivial amount of profit, whatever it is, we're depriving them. And don't tell me we're not. We're depriving them of the park at weekends, many, many weekends. And Hawaii, we have at least 2 council members that seem to think that's all right.
I move we reopen the bookings to 2012.
I second.
You what?
Well, if I could, I know you got a motion on the table, we can come back to it. I just would like to, we went from being able to make some money, making maybe $30,000 to $60,000, to maybe we're going to break even. Yes, and so, you know, that's a wide swath. And so for me, the original proposal that was on the table says, okay, if we're really not that sure, and it's that wide a number, and we're really going to have to crank it down, then I would say, then do your analysis and bring it back. Which is what the original proposal that was on the table, and I would support that. But I find it surprising that we have that degree of error. But I realize that, you know, the questions are impromptu and it's difficult to work under, you know, quick, you know, everybody's looking at you, so.
Yeah, can we rule the motion? We have a motion to table this item until the next council meeting by Councilmember McKeeson. I will second it. Okay. All in favor? Aye. Okay. All opposed?
Opposed?
All right, so it is carried. Okay, next item on the agenda is item number 21, which is bills, I think.
Trash.
Trash.
Favorite item. So, do we want to have somebody bring on the special machine? Yeah, just to file bill trash. Okay, probably appropriate. Let's go. Okay, so as we're getting started, members of the audience understand that, you know, this is similar to what we had to do earlier in the year, and we actually started last December. You know, we have a contract with Recology and the SBWMA to do our refuge collection as well as disposal. And as time goes on and in accordance with the contracts, the contractor does have the right to raise the fees. And also there were some circumstances that we faced in setting our rates, and the discussions that went around the rates. It took us a number of meetings. You can leave it there to start with. It took us a number of meetings to decide really and come together as an organization to really set the final rates. So our rates were not set at the beginning of the year. So there are some rate increases we need to discuss. And there has been the committee that you see up there of Jerry and John and myself, who were appointed by the council to look into this and other issues associated with trash and recycling. You know, we were asked to continually look at what's going on in this area, and this is one of the things that, you know, John alerted us that with the rate increases, we needed to do our notification now. So the committee met. We're going to talk about the process that we went through and the documentation we went through. But we met and we determined what the high-end cost would be for the rates, and those are the rates that are noticed. You'll see later in the presentation that that's not the rates that we're necessarily recommending that the council approve, but we had to set rates that would be no higher than what we noticed, and so that's what you've got. So if we go on to the next chart. So what we're going to go over is just kind of a tutorial on the contract and the cost drivers, the forecast that we got from the SBWMA and Recology, because it's two. You may remember from previous conversations, our past provider of pickup service was Allied Waste, and they had some residual costs that they had forecast to us, and they had to be audited, and they've now become settled, and we now need to close out on those. we'll just touch base quickly on the noticed rates, a recommendation from the committee on how we should handle the Allied underrun, and then the recommended rates of how we'd move forward. So, next please. Thank you. Again, we have a 10-year contract that started, actually it was agreed in October 2010 and then started at the beginning of this year with Recology, and the contract with SBWMA was signed in October, okay? It was developed over a several-year period of time and provided for really non-revocable service contract for pickup and processing of refuse from Atherton and actually 12 other cities by that process by the SBWMA and Recology, okay? The pickup service is fixed price, has a true-up in it, and it has a CPI adjustment that we debated actually in this very room back in December. There's also a variable cost element of it, which is for the disposal and commodity recycling, and we do get the benefit of the recycling cost. So the term is 2011 to 2020, inclusively 12 community service groups. It does provide a 10% franchise fee that the town gets. So whatever our full rates are, we get 10% of that back, and we use that to fix our roads and keep things under control, because there is very heavy trucks that are running through our town to pick up the refuge. And to remind everybody, there was an approximate 45% increase from the beginning of the year that we approved at the park, and took effect in July 15th. And these were the result of, at the time we knew it, we were going to have a shortfall, and now we're going to get all the details of what that shortfall is. Okay, next chart. So to remind you, we have 4 different suites. A suite is a black can of a certain size. Whether or not it can actually hold that size is still under debate, and actually has been scientifically proven, actually. It also comes with a blue cart and 2 green carts. Many residents have extra green carts, some as many as 23. Okay, we can tell you who those are, but that'd be a violation of the Privacy Act. And we decided at the time that we would charge also for those carts that were number 3 and on. So we raised the rates from the numbers on the left to the numbers on the right, and that was effective the 15th of July. In 2011, the rate hike was due in part because of high unfunded organics. Previous decisions had been made that to encourage diversion of organics, that to get the process flowing here in town, that we would not charge people for processing their organics, neither for the pickup nor for the processing. And indeed, we found out, much to our surprise, that was the primary cost driver of our rates here in town. And in fact, it cost over $19 per cart per month to pick up and process organic waste. So these increases, which became effective in July, knowingly had a shortfall from what we knew was going to be our financial obligation, and we made that clear in the meeting. We also knew that there was an Allied waste bill that was projected to be around $337, and we thought that, and we were encouraged by the SBWMA, that number was actually going to be negotiated and audited down to a lower level, but that also was not addressed in this adjustment. Next chart, please. Okay, so what else is happening? Well, there is cart migration. We put the rates up, and people said, well, wait a second, I can do more organics. I can recycle my food. I'm going to make sure I really use that blue bin. I'm going to really crunch down my trash. And so people went from a 32 or a 64 gallon to the next lower level. So there was migration. So even at the time with the rate study that we had done, the numbers changed. When we started charging for green cans, many people said, wait a second, I'm not going to pay $6. I'll have my gardener take it away. Or, I don't really need these. I can go down to 4 or 3, or I can get down to 2. Okay? Now, in addition to that, many people have the old Allied waste green cans, and those weren't in the database. So over a period of time, our database is getting updated, and we're starting to do audits on who actually has green cans by actually, there's a button that they push and it records what address is getting picked up at the time. And we're collecting and updating our billing, so that number is changing. And right now, if we had a full year of green card costs at $6, just at $6, it'd be about $145,000 a year. That's the impact of what we collect on that. Next chart, please. Okay, so currently we've met with the SBWMA, and we've heard what their forecasts are, and we've got their analysis, okay? And what they're saying is right now, if they propagate our rates forward for all of next year, our total cost collection will be $2.44 million, okay? That has we have then the projected shortfall of $686,000. That's including the franchise fee of what we're not going to end up paying this year, which we knew we weren't going to pay. Okay, then there was another $190,000, roughly $200,000 in forecast costs, which still are somewhat variable, but those are associated with the CPI indexes, and they're also associated with what the SBWMA is forecasting is going to be the quantity and the cost of disposal. And then finally, we have the cost for the Allied contract. So, we thought that the number was going to be 334. We spent 6 months doing an evaluation and audits, probably spent all sorts of money on looking into that. We didn't. The SBWMA did. And lo and behold, the number wasn't 334. It was 337. So the rate actually has gone up. Now, I'll point out also that we also had a surplus at one time of about $164,000 that we found that was a change in when Allied was doing disposal, and that was found in the 2002 to 2008 time frame, and that number got swept into the general fund, and some of it was spent on rate increases later. Next. Okay. So what's the methodology that we, the committee of three, used in putting together our notice rates? Okay, so as I mentioned at the the prologue here, we had to hit a top line number. We couldn't have something where we said after some analysis, oh, by the way, we think we need to raise the rates. Once we send the notice out, the time clock starts ticking, and if we're going to get these rates in effect by the 1st of January, we needed to come up with numbers that would cover all of the costs. To cover all the costs, it was going to take a 49% increase, okay? And that included the costs associated with Allied, etc. So now that is essentially, from July, it's a 114% increase from January, okay, for some people. But it's also going to show that we're going to have about 100% windfall in town's franchise fees, okay? We're not calculating, and we did not do an analysis on what's it going to do to our green rates. So the green rates are not in here, okay? And we also didn't include calculations that take into account the commercial rate increase, which, by the way, we've also raised to about 100% and noticed at the same time. These rates have not been increased in over 3 years, okay? So, if in fact we raise the rates to 49%, and we'll see this and I can give you some calculations in detail, but if in fact we raise it to 49% as we're saying, we did in the notice rates, the town would have a substantial surplus, not this next year we would break even, but the year after, which could be in the order of high six figures, possibly a seven figure, but there's the true up and there is additional costs. So a very, very high, substantial surplus because you've got the 337, because you've got the $600,000 shortfall from the year before. So we're adding all those things in there, and we year on year continue to build that surplus. So go to the next chart. These are the notice rates we came up with those fees For the trash cart size, we're raising the numbers, and the previous, chart number 5 had the earlier rates. We were at for example, 20, and we're going up to 30. The 32 gallon goes up to 65, 64 gallon to 125, and the 96 goes up to 185. Now, we also looked at the green cans, and we said, okay, well, as we mentioned earlier, if you have 2 green cans, it's part of the suite, so that's included in the cost. If you have 3 to 4, instead of paying $6 per can per month, we're raising it to 10. And if it's 5 and up, it's 15 for those numbers 5 and up. Now, you may say that's a pretty steep change. Remember, it's $19.31 for each one. So even at the 5 and up rate, they're still being subsidized by the black can rates. So, commercial rates. We have to mention those. The commercial rates, as I mentioned, have not been increased in over 3 years, and the rates were below the residential rates. So our commercial customers, there are very few here in Atherton, but the schools, the Menlo Circus Club, their rates were below the residential rates, and we just didn't think that was fair. So we came up with numbers looking at kind of like for like, and we compared them with a similar town here, and it was East Palo Alto, and you see the numbers that we've come up with. For a 96-gallon can, $185. For a 1-yard box, $200. For a 2-yard box, $400 and $550. Okay, and then the organics. Some of them do have organics, green barrels, and if they want to have those, it's the same rates as the residentials will pay.
Is that typical? I mean, I see you say that's similar to East Palo Alto. Is that typical? Are these rates typical for commercial and other jurisdictions?
They're all over the board. People have Menlo Parks is lower. I can give you. I'm more than happy to share with the whole council the full table, but ours would be with East Palo Alto, some of the highest in the 12-member jurisdiction.
That's all I wanted.
Okay, so what should we do about the Allied settlement? Well, because of the fact that there was a surplus and it got swept into the general fund, and although parts of it were decreased, the total amount was decreased by covering later increases, it's really unclear with all the fact-finding, because there was a changeover in finance directors and things like that when we were looking to this. That number could be anywhere between roughly $50,000 and $100,000. So we don't think that the residents of Atherton have already paid for that. That was in their fees. They shouldn't be asked to pay again because they already been taxed once. You shouldn't be taxed for the same thing twice. So we're saying that number should be applied to the Allied settlement. We're saying the remainder of the Allied settlement should come out of the green cart fees, which at the time I wrote this chart, because I had to meet the deadline, I was estimating $100,000, but I did get the latest survey from the audits from Recology, and currently at $6 a barrel, we're going to be pulling in approximately $145,000. And if we raise the rates, it's going to be higher. So it could be up to $200,000, but there will be cart migration. And then lastly, there's going to be approximately $133,000 quote-unquote gain that's above the number that we have in our budget from the franchise fee. And so again, that could be used to pay for the Allied settlement. So that's how we would make the numbers on that. Moving on. So looking at that, we said, okay, if we did that, then the Allied is off the board, then we're still collecting approximately $600 and some odd thousand more next year to cover the underrun that we had this year. So as a group, and as a recommendation to the full council, because the group didn't want to make the decision for the council, we're recommending that actually we bring the numbers down just a little bit. We would still have a substantial surplus, probably in 2013, that we could use, given cart migration and things like that. but I'm thinking it's going to be several $100,000. And that could be used for against future increases. And it's conceivable that if we agree with these rates or slightly somewhere around this number, that we may never need to, for the next 4 or 5 years, increase our rates, even though there is a true-up coming, even though there are going to be disposal fee cost improvement. So we're recommending, as opposed to being at 30, at 29 for the 20-gallon, at 57 versus 64, 115 versus 125, and 170 versus 185. This represents roughly a 38% increase versus 49%. Okay? But it would still give us an increase. So if somebody wanted to know what were the changes with regards to where are we this year from last year? You know, last year in January, at the beginning of January, a 20-gallon cart was at $17.32. We raised their fees 15%, 15.45%, going to 29%, gives them an overall increase in 1 year of 67.44. The 32-gallon can, we raised their rates in July by approximately 58%, 59%. With this increase, we'll give them a 1 year increase of about 100%. And it's about 100% for everybody else as well. So I don't want to misspeak for Jerry or for John, but I think the consensus in our meeting at the time was that these lower numbers were probably prudent. We didn't want to have a big surplus, and we wanted to lessen the blow, especially given the fact of where we are. So I can answer any questions, and I'll also say that because of the time frame to get these charts out, I did circulate the charts. I got some comments back, but everybody, so if Jerry's asking a question, he and I have not sat down to go over in detail, so it's not discourse in the group, it's just the...
You said you were going to have a like for like on the commercial rate. On the 96 gallon, now that you brought it down, you're recommending bringing it down to 170. Would you change the commercial rate to 170 instead of the 185 on the 96?
That would be, I think that'd be prudent, but that would be up for the council to decide. I personally, there's not that many commercial customers. The commercial customers actually could opt out if they choose to. But then if they do choose to, then we don't have the cost of them being picked up, and we don't have the cost of them having their refuse disposed of. So there actually is a variable cost as well going out.
So that might change those other numbers as well?
I wouldn't change the yard fees.
Thank you.
Bill, nice job. I think the key thing here, this is not a science. The big factors here are the migration down to the black carts and what will happen to the green carts, and will people start using their gardeners to because we will continue to subsidize the green carts even with this proposal. I think we still need to look at 2013 and 2014 a little more closely, and maybe come back with tweaking perhaps at the next meeting on that. But you're good.
Yep.
Personally, right, okay. I think that adjusting it down, just like you just did for this, is a little bit more palatable. Personally, I love the new garbage system. I can't imagine, having to deal with garbage and recycling and everything. And I just think that we've got a very high level of garbage service right now, and it's just so much easier than it used to be to wheel out the carts rather than all the bins and the recycling and the separating, and truly doing all the composting and the food waste. It really is a better system for our environment overall, and for the can migration to get down to lower solid waste disposal. I think that is the way that we really need to go for our environment, and it just may cost a little more, but I think overall the costs are very reasonable. just because you've got somebody coming every week to pick up all your garbage and take it away. I mean, I'm very happy with that.
Yeah, there was, if I could mention it, at one time and at the original presentation, we did talk about changing the service levels, picking up every other week and things like that. But, and while the cost for doing something like that is in, a savings of a six-figure number, unless we're going to pass that directly on to the people, I just can't see that people would say, yeah, you can charge me more, or keep charging me the same, but take my service down. So, it's all about the service, I think, at this point in time, and the service is improving. So, the assumption here for people who have asked in the past is like-for-like service for what we're enjoying today, or not enjoying, but paying for.
Well, Bill, I think that was a very thorough presentation, and I know there's a lot of work involved. Congratulate you on it. My question is, what action do we need to take tonight?
This is just a receive.
We don't need to take any action to approve those
Receive
rates.
and comment. You're not
approving.
We'll do that at the rate setting next month.
Okay.
It was a very good presentation. I just wish there was more folks here
All
to
right.
hear it tonight because it was very complete.
So do you want me to enhance this, or just,
Well, one thing can I suggest, Jerry, I think you're right, that we should go back and talk about your concerns about first and beyond,
Okay.
and whether or not there's any tweaking that we need to do in that
Okay.
as a committee, and come back to the council now that they're up to speed, to give them a couple of options at the next meeting.
okay. All right, great.
Public comment, yeah?
I'm still Paul Clement, and I still live at Maple. Just a couple questions. Obviously, you got to pay for the service you get, so it's unfortunate, but obviously the rates have to go up. A couple questions. One, is there a restriction on having like multiple 20-gallon cans? Because obviously, if you do the math, you're better off to have 4 20-gallon cans than you are to have 196. And so, do you just say, let them figure it out? Or have you done the math and found out that the 20
No,
only hold 12, and so therefore you don't really get as much.
We brought this up at the meeting when we had the final rate setting, and actually people could turn in cans and go with smaller cans. Now, I'll caution you if you want to go with a bunch of 20-gallon cans, because they don't hold 20 gallons. And if you jam everything in there, then the trash you have in there for this week will be in there next week.
Right.
So be careful, But
Yeah.
but yes, you can change the suites. There was a discussion with and a specific request. Can we restrict it? And I got the impression from Recology that yes, we could restrict it if we wanted to, but we didn't take any action to do that.
May I make a comment? I think Menlo Park has it. I have property in Menlo Park, and you cannot do what you just said you could do. They won't let you. If you have two 32-gallon cans at that lower rate each, they will charge you for a 64-gallon
Right.
can.
So that's what I was just asking.
They will not let you. No.
Then we should probably make
And
that part of our
we
condition.
need to make that part of our condition, because, that is just unfair to try to work the system that way, and Menlo Park clearly will not allow that.
Okay, and then the only other question was sort of the thinking behind continuing to subsidize the green cans. Because from the standpoint that if somebody's going to say, okay, fine, I'll just get my gardener to do it, isn't that good? I mean, is that's something we're trying to discourage? Because it just sounds like the person with 23 cans is just getting
No, they need to have
Further-
their gardeners do it.
further subsidized, and I'm not sure.
Well, at $15, I think you're at a break-even point now. Yes, indeed, it's $4.31 more, but the gardeners don't have to take it to SBWMA. There are other disposal locations that are up and down 101, and so I think that the break-even point is probably close. From what I understand, talking to several people who are in this business, as well as we're talking to Recology, that may be the breaking point. But, I don't think anybody on the committee felt that $19.31 is an unrealistic number, but I think it, we're not trying to push people out.
Paul, this has been like pulling teeth to get data, and I think they've done some cost accounting they probably wouldn't have done if we haven't been pushing on this. And your question's a good one.
Right.
And
Yeah, no,
we continue to take a look at that and question. Their disposal fees are quite a bit higher than some other agencies around, and it's puzzling to me.
But it used to be previously with the previous system that that was you bought the barrel once and then you could put as many barrels out as you wanted. That's the reason why people have 23 barrels, and I don't think people understand that they're getting charged based on the barrel now.
They understand it very much so, because it's in their bills.
It's a new charge. There's two barrels get free. 2 green are free, included in your black can rate. Anything over 3, you get charged for that third one and the fourth one at the $10 rate. And then
So what they just charge you, are these all monthly charges, or are these
Yes.
daily?
Yes.
So they're just tracking, they calculate each one, they track every single
Well,
place?
you kind of have to sign up for it. I mean, there'll be a notice.
Well, there is
sent.
initially, certain people have said, I have these many. So some people are self-reported already. Over the last couple months, Recology has been going through and doing an audit, and where they're finding that there's 23 barrels and they say they have 2, they're notifying the homeowners and it'll be in their bill. Now, they have the right to say, I don't want those, come get those barrels, and they go away and they dial down. Or they can say, I need more, and they can dial up. So there's that flexibility in the contract that we've got. But they're being notified. If the green barrel is out, we've instructed Recology, don't say, hey, there's only two here, so I'm going to leave a green barrel full. We've told them to pick it up.
But are they
and
tracking
then,
it? So, for example, if you have 2 green barrels and you put out one week, 1 the next week, and then you put out 3 the third week and 3 the fourth week, can you do that, or can
No,
you not do that?
no, it's per pickup. So if you put out one week, then you've kept our costs, helped to keep our costs lower, because remember, there are adjustments. And if you put out 3 1 week, then you're going to be in the database of having 3 for that month.
Well, I think it would be very helpful if you either put that presentation out, sent that out to people so that they can see what you're doing, because I personally think it's a huge amount of increase, and I understand why and the whole bit, but it's still to say you're raising your increase is 100 and some %, and from a perspective of that's not the way gardeners work. They come in and they do a big garden clear, and then you get 20. You have stuff for 20 barrels, and you have to just pile it in your yard, and then each week put it into your barrel. It seems like there should be some flexibility that people are allowed to put things out when they need to put them out. And if you only have one barrel 1 week and no barrels the next week, that if you have a gardener come, you should be able to put out 3 barrels for that third week. So it seems like there should be some way to track it based on your monthly usage rather than based strictly on the weekly pickup. And I also think that you shouldn't put an extra rule in that says you can't do this or this, because I think people feel already they're so pissed off about this, and maybe they're not at this meeting, but people are pissed. So if you're going to say now, okay, great, now we're going to control how many barrels you're allowed to have and how you put those all out, it's just going to make people mad. I don't see there's any point in that. I mean, you're going to have 2 or 3 people to figure that out. The rest aren't, so why put an extra ruling in place? But I mean, I don't understand why there shouldn't be some flexibility on giving the end user some flexibility on how their stuff is picked up as well. I don't know if there's any way you can go back and negotiate that, but it'd be nice to have something. If you're increasing something, you can say you're giving something in return. That's my thought.
Well, a lot of what's been negotiated has been negotiated over the last 3 years, and unfortunately, the agency and the contractor who signed up for a fixed price contract has not been overly flexible in changing the rules for Atherton. I think we've.
Or maybe you get a credit for each time they steal my bins and drop it in their thing. If my bin 15 times now, I literally said, I think actually,
Yeah.
7 times my bin has been taken.
So we need to report that.
You need it and give me a call. I have someone who can help.
Well, no, it's really annoying. You go out and you're barrel's gone in it. They drop it in the truck and it's taken.
They drop
They drop it in the truck?
Yeah,
Look,
I literally had 7 barrels over the last 4 months taken from the big holiday gala and they dropped them in the truck.
okay, so they need to then replace it, but you're calling Recology and telling them that?
Yeah, I am.
Good. Because we also have that ordinance, you know, they're not putting them back in place, we should be charging them.
Well, if then they leave them in the street, too, they leave them smack right in the street.
And we need to report that. Yeah.
So do I report that to college or when it's you?
Well, it should go to Recology, but we have a hotline here that's taking the numbers and we're keeping track of things because sometimes the information isn't properly recorded. So John has been so kind as to set up a hotline here where we're collecting that information.
Which is very poorly used. So I would suggest for sure call Recology because there's penalties involved if they don't adhere to contract.
And we got our own ordinance now. We can make some extra money.
Yeah, okay. Are we finished with this item? Well, if we're finished with the item, now we go to item number 13, which Bill, you pulled.
I'll write all that. I'm ready. 13. I had a question on this one. It's not, and it was more of a question than necessarily a poll. I know that last council meeting there was a discussion about some signs on a street that I actually am near, and so I didn't participate in the conversation, nor was I in the room. However, I did watch it on YouTube, and there was lots of questions on, well, how many people do we do a survey, and why do we really want to spend $200 on a speed limit sign and stuff like that. So I kind of wonder, what kind of survey did we do on this, and are we going to be consistent, since we'd like to talk about consistency here, especially today?
Well, this came up at the Transportation Committee meeting, and the reason that it came up is that at the corner of Heather and Irvine, there's a cul-de-sac that looks as if it goes through Middlefield, but it doesn't. And the people in the cul-de-sac are very upset because they keep having these cars and trucks go into the cul-de-sac, recognize they can't get out of there, and just turn around. And I've seen it many times. So they asked that we come up with some kind of warning system so that cars would recognize they couldn't get through the Middlefield that way. I personally said a sign saying this way to Middlefield, but they didn't like that. So what they wanted to do was to put in striping that would indicate that the cars coming down Irvine especially, which is a problem, would see the striping going into Heather and therefore would follow the striping, and that's what the Transportation Committee finally recommended.
Okay, I was just asking the question, just trying to get data, looking for consistency.
Okay, can we approve that?
I just said I had a question on it. I didn't say.
Oh, okay, so that was approved, and then.
I assumed it was approved. I just wanted to ask a question, but.
It wasn't.
Motion to
Okay,
approve
all right.
item 13.
Then we'll.
Motion to approve item number 13.
I'll approve it begrudgingly.
All in favor? Aye. 14. Karen, that was yours.
Lauren.
So I guess.
Warren.
I don't get this one. I don't understand why this is needed. And I think it's going to have an incredibly negative impact on the traffic on Middlefield Road. Right now you have Middlefield Road going this way, traffic going this way, getting to Ethanol, and there's this sort of turn lane here that then allows the carpool traffic to go this way and then circle through the school. So if you say that you're no longer allowed, now right now what happens is when you stop at the red light or green light where you're stopping and there's a cross guard here allowing the traffic to go back and forth with kids. If you now say you're not allowed to turn right on red, what happens is this is now blocking all the bike traffic, and it's also all the carpool traffic now is going to back up and get into this lane, and now traffic will not be able to move anymore on Middlefield. And I think that it's already so incredibly slow and so difficult there. People are already really upset because of the traffic light that I don't understand what we're gaining. And maybe you can tell me what your thoughts are on that.
Well, again, the Transportation Committee, this was requested by the principal of Encinal, because she said, cars come up to that red light, kids are coming across on the crosswalk, and they're still turning right, and there have been some incidents where they nearly hit the kids, because they're making a right turn on red. And therefore, they wanted not to allow cars to make a right turn on red. And, you know, it seems as if the safety of the children, in my mind, was the number one priority. And that's why the Transportation Committee she suggested that, actually, and they approved it.
Yeah, but there's always, there's a cross person here that's already, you can't turn red while that person's in the middle. There's
Apparently,
a crossing.
cars are ignoring the guy with the sign, and they're still turning right. And the kids have been nearly injured. This is the story, and I think Mike might have been, this is the story that she came up with. So.
Well, I'm concerned about safety kids. I've got, my kids go to Encinal. The same way I'm concerned about getting through the park and so on. I'm concerned about the safety. But I'm really also very concerned about the fact that when we get out of the car and we park here, we have to walk up here. And you've got all these extra cars here now backed up, and you don't have a way to walk safely next to that. And now, the other thing that happens is that in the afternoon when you're coming, now the carpool lane backs up all the way around that corner, and you're not going to let that traffic move through.
Of course, it moves on green. I mean, when the light goes to green, it's free to move right.
Okay. I think you're going to have people really upset. Even when they tried this for 3 days, put this forcing right turn out of the parking lot, people were just so upset because they couldn't get anywhere. So I just think you're going to have a lot of really, really upset.
All I'm saying, it was the principal of the school that requested it.
Was she at the Transportation
I
Committee?
can't remember. You remember, Mike? I think she was.
I don't believe she was. I think she sent in some sort of letter.
That came through her. And my feeling is, it was a compromise on kids' safety. Even though it backs up cars a little bit more, I go with a compromise.
All right, well, I think a lot more kids are going to be late to school. I think that there's people are so upset already about the stoplight there that are not in the school, that are just taking up time. I just think it's a bad move.
Can you speak with the principal, and maybe we can approve this subject to, the principal withdrawing it with further consideration?
I'm happy to talk to her, but I just didn't realize that this, I just think if you took a poll, like what they did here, they put out this thing and asked parents what they thought.
Would you like this tabled until we talk to them?
Well, maybe we can approve it subject to,
All right.
the
But then
principal withdrawing
she's
it.
one person. She's dealing with this thing, right? But she's not the one that's in the car. She's making the rules about what time you have to get your kid to school. But, it takes an extra 20 minutes for everybody to get to school now. I don't think a lot of parents are going to be pleased about that. That's all.
Maybe we should table it until we know.
Let's table
I'm
it.
happy to go talk to her. I'll be happy to make an appointment with her and go talk to her this week.
Why don't you
You're gonna
find
hate
out
me for
more?
this.
I
bring it-
suggest we table it until you have that.
But I think it's worthwhile doing that because I think otherwise you're going to have a lot of people really angry.
Can I
You know-
have a motion to table it?
So moved.
Fine. If I could just say, discussions like this, I think, are counterproductive to the purpose of having a transportation committee. Because if we're going to change the decision of the transportation committee, then maybe all these decisions should be going to the city traffic engineer first, let a professional decide it, and then make the decision,
Well,
because...
I think, Mike, were you there at Transportation Committee?
Yes, staff was there. However, we don't really have an opportunity to take a look at all of the suggestions. And so to improve that, prior to every future transportation meeting, myself, Chief Flint, and Steve Tyler is going to go out and do a field review of all these citizen-initiated traffic control requests so that we can weigh in a more effective way to the transportation.
Yeah, because otherwise we just add so much extra work and so much extra debate, and there's so much emotion at the transportation committee when a safety issue comes up, and then one person can change the mind of the transportation committee. So I really question the efficacy of the transportation committee at this point.
I think the Transportation Committee can be very effective, but I don't think they had all the information right now. And I think if you had looked at it and said, no, there's not going to be backup, no, it's not a safety concern, then that's fine. but we don't know that for a fact. So that's the problem.
So-
And that's why I think it needs to
Why don't we
be.
table this one?
Let's
for now?
table this one. Can I have a motion to
So
table?
moved to table.
Second. All in favor?
If I talk to Allison when here, who should I ask to come back
With
Mike.
Ed and with Mike.
Okay. Next item we have is.
Vote? Did everybody vote?
Yeah, I asked everybody, did you vote? Sorry. Okay. Next item is 15. Bill, that's one of yours.
I've asked to pull this one because I was absolutely surprised with the number. I guess I looked at the April minutes, and we had gotten a bid of like, or a grant of $30,000 for this, and we said that was going to cover 88%, and now suddenly it was surprising, it's not covering that. So, you've rightly said, look, this is a very worthwhile project. I'm not debating the worthwhileness of the project, but you said we're going to take the money out of, I guess, some Cape Seal funds. So it was unclear to me whether that was excess to the Cape Seal, that the Cape Seal projects are all done and that's excess that didn't get spent, or are we sacrificing and not going to Cape Seal some streets that were scheduled for, and if that's the case, then where do they fall on the rating system, and are they actually should have been Cape Sealed, but they shouldn't because they were below that 70 limit? So can you give me the insight?
Well, the answer to the first question is that this isn't surplus money, so this will affect this year's Cape Seal program. So the number of streets will be decreased. But in talking with the engineer who reviews all the rating systems, he didn't feel that would have a tremendous, by reducing it by the I can't remember, the 33,000, the additional money that we were asking for, would not significantly affect the condition of the roadway. So in other words, those streets would just be delayed until the following year.
But they weren't falling below the level where they were on the list to get repaired. Or
They were at a level to where a Cape Seal would be the appropriate treatment at this point. But we just didn't feel that by delaying it, it would that those streets would significantly deteriorate to a point that it would require more treatment by delaying it 1 year.
Well, do we lose the grant money if we don't spend it this year?
If we don't spend it this year, I don't know the answer to that question. That's something we'd have to check with Caltrans.
Because there is a crosswalk within 100 yards of that, and there's another crosswalk north of that, or excuse me, east of that, and there's another crosswalk with a traffic light 150 yards west of that. So while I understand that community wants to have one right there for themselves, which is fine, and I have no issue with that, when it was brought to this council, it was going to be essentially free, and now it's not. And so...
2 points.
Yeah,
One,
okay.
it is a safety issue, because right now they're walking in that gully. Because they don't feel safe going to the corner ever since that truck took the corner and took it out. And it's also to the school, that they would use that crosswalk. The other thing is, didn't we accelerate some of the Cape Seals this year because we had, the bid was so low that we could include more than we had otherwise anticipated? Didn't we actually accelerate some of the projects?
Steve Tyler's saying yes. Yes.
So, you see, there's a trade-off. We accelerated a lot of projects.
Well, that's what I was asking earlier.
From
Was
this
it
year.
Surplus, okay. So essentially, you're saying it's coming out of surplus money from the Cape Seal project that we did because we paid for things that were going to be on next year's budget. So essentially, we got a surplus.
The way you
Fine.
just said that's correct.
Yes.
So that's the way I want to look at it. It's just it's a budget.
Yes.
I move adoption.
I'll second.
All in favor?
I'll say aye.
Okay, good. Next item and the last item is 17.
I asked for that to be pulled.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Oh, Kathy, you may go first.
I don't think we should change it. I think we've been talking about uniformity and predictability and no surprises, and at $150 an hour. We just recently, about a year ago recently, redid those fees. I don't know what $150 an hour would bring to predictability and uniformity. I think people need that kind of uniformity, and I don't want it to be changed.
Okay. My comments are this. When we were doing the outsourcing of all the services, we told the community the service is going to be as good, if not better, and cheaper. And now we're saying, I can tell you, I'm still getting calls from people who were here who ended up leaving, because this ended up becoming the last item, of calls not being answered by the arborist, of appointments being made by the arborist and him not showing up. The service is worse, and now we're going to charge $150. I don't think that that's in line with what we told the residents when we went with the massive restructuring of our delivery. The arborist services is something that's been near and dear to a lot of people. Perhaps the arborist we had on staff was doing extra things, but in my mind, charging at this point in time, while the service is still sketchy, an extra $150 I think is heresy, and I strongly disagree with it.
John?
Well, I would respectfully say that I'd be very careful about assuming that someone who calls up who's disgruntled is actually getting reduced service, because I think what's going on is an apples to oranges comparison. Part of the restructuring was we were pretty close to $1 million upside down, and one of the things we've tried to do is to get cost recovery for certain services that aren't a part of the basic part of a normal municipal corporation to do, but there are additional things that are peculiar and unique to Atherton. And one of the things we got into is that we had an arborist that did tons of extra stuff, and people became kind of addicted to it, and they had an expectation. I'm trying to, and this is not Lisa's fault, it's my fault, I'm trying to get 80% cost recovery of our arborist services, that things that people want. You know what, we're not sending folks out to inspect roses anymore. If you want to have us inspect roses, it's $150 an hour, because that's what the guy charges us. If there's a service issue, we need to know about each and every one of it, because we have folks here that are watching like hawks to make sure that the services that are being requested are being provided as good or better than before, but we're just asking for cost recovery. Now, if council would like to tell me that arborist services are to be a subsidized service that you'll pay for out of general fund, I stand prepared to do that.
I believe that what you're asking here is for a pass-through cost of $150 for these arborist services associated with taking down trees, going out and checking a tree, making sure it fits the criteria, and saying, yep, you can take it down, or no, you can't. First off, it doesn't cost $150 to go do that. You're on site for just a few minutes. I really think that I agree with you that perhaps the previous arborist that we had here might have been doing some additional services that some residents, because of associations and working with her day in and day out or over a period of time, came to know and enjoy. But that's not the things I'm hearing from. What's the arborist cost that's in the budget, Louise? How much did we put in the budget last year?
Current arborist?
Yeah, how much?
$135,000.
But I thought we had costs associated in the budget of substantially higher number for this year, for our budget this year.
For our budget this year for the arborist, we budgeted his expenditure $435,000.
$435,000 for doing the job that somebody was $135,000.
Did you say 400?
Yes.
135.
Yeah, he misunderstood.
What's in the budget now?
135.
135,
Yeah,
not
right.
145.
And we're striving for 80% cost recovery on that. If that's the wrong direction, you just need to let me know.
I think it's a service we're taking away from or we're telling people. They used to get it. It was free.
Essentially.
It wasn't free, it was.
I understand, but it was included in our operating budget, and I think maybe next year we look at it, but I think that it's a bridge too far at this point in time.
Now you do see, Vice Mayor, that it's $100 for a tree removal and $38 for each tree thereafter. So mostly what they're charging for is the mobilization to get there, to do it, the overhead associated with it. That's probably pretty darn close to what it actually costs.
Any other council member comments?
No, I'm in support of the proposal.
Wow. My last comment is, I think we get the services bedded down before we look at that. I'd like to respectfully request consideration that perhaps we table this increase until the services are bedded down and we have some statistics that actually the service is being provided. Because honestly, I'm still getting a lot of calls from people that, and I don't think that they're abusing the system for roses.
When you say a lot of calls, you mean 10, 25?
If we don't receive any feedback to us, how do we fix it? Because we haven't received any feedback like that.
Well, Bill, can you, if we table this resolution till next month?
Well, I think we table it till January, I think.
I mean, if we table it, could you provide feedback to John about these kind of things?
Sure. Sure, I've given some feedback to Mike initially, on my most recent rounds of calls. When I was calling people about the library, I got an earful on the arborist. So
Yeah, I think that, I can understand some of this, that people got it in their mind free before, and now they're paying a lot of money for it. So I would be willing to table this until the next council meeting, at which time you provide to John as much feedback as you can about the complaint.
Well, I'll give them the complaint information as soon as we have it. I suggest that we table it until the January meeting and we allow the service to bed down and allow the calendar to change. That's what I
will.
So this is, what I'm trying to understand is, don't you pay a fee to have your tree taken out?
Yeah.
So, what, is this an additional fee to that? Because when you sign up for a permit, you take out, but this is saying that you're being charged over and above for them to come and look at it first, or? No, this is just the fee.
There's a fee if it goes to the planning commission. If they have to go to the planning commission, it costs them $750 just to get it. That's totally different.
So this is my concern. Okay, I get it. I took out trees, I paid a permit fee, I took out those trees. But before I asked for those permits, I had Kathy come to the property and she walked the property with me and she showed me which trees she recommended taking out, which trees she didn't recommend taking out, so on. That was a service that, to me, is protecting our trees and making sure that we keep our heritage trees safe and we keep things safe before you then take all this work to go and submit all this paperwork. So I personally would not like to see people being charged to go and have somebody visit to actually help them protect the trees on their property. Now, I don't have a problem with saying you've got to get a permit to take out that tree and you're paying some money for that permit, but when you take away the service of the main person who's been protecting our heritage trees and you say you're going to have to be charged every time someone comes to the property, I'm not going to call that person. I'm going to just go and make your own call. They come out afterwards, but I think you're doing a disservice to our trees by making it extra expense to have the arborist involved, because ultimately people are going to try to avoid the arborist. You have to pay already your own private arborist to do that. So that's my take. My take is that don't take away the service that's protecting our trees.
So do you want to make a
Well, so maybe there's a way that a certain initial visit by the town arborist could be a free visit, but then subsequent, if they have to come out over and over and over again, it's like having counter time that's free for advice and recommendation as a service. I can understand that, but I think that our permit fees for removing of the current fees are really low, and I agree with the recommendation to increase those fees, as stated in the report.
Okay, well,
So maybe we can make a motion that we just take.
yeah, I'd like to at least have the council consider a motion that we table this till the January meeting. We allow the services to bed down. I will get John the information, and we all will be diligent about getting that, and then we can reassess it at that time. I don't think 2 months, because we're here in October, 2 months is going to make a big issue and a dent in our budget.
The motion was to continue the matter, because table means not to a date certain. Continue is to a date certain.
Discuss it again in January.
Continue to
There you
January.
go.
All right, I will second. All in favor? Okay,
No.
Opposed?
that's the last one. Council reports, no council reports. Are there any future
Could
agenda items?
could I respectfully request other council members to try and include reports from time to time? I'm interested in what's going on in
I agree. You're the only one
other
that
activities that.
submits.
I submitted one once, but no one else does, so I never do.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll take this.
people were saying
Anyway, there are no future agenda items. Are there any further public comments? Seeing no further public comments, I would immediately request a motion to adjourn. So moved. All in favor? Aye.